My name is Evelyn Hart, and I never imagined that the happiest day of my son's life would become one of the most painful moments of mine. When you raise a child alone, you hold every memory close to your heart, every scraped knee, every late-night fever, every school project, every tiny triumph. You become both the soft place they fall and the ladder they climb. And when you finally see them stand at the altar, tall and grown and full of promises for the future, you expect maybe a tear, a hug, a whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." What I didn't expect was to sit among 200 guests and hear my son say into the microphone with a smile, "My mother-in-law paid for everything. My mom didn't even buy a flower." Those words, they didn't just sting. They cracked something deep inside me. But to understand how we reached that moment, you have to understand everything that came before it. I raised my son, Daniel Hart, completely alone. His father, Marcus, left when Daniel was 3 months old. He didn't leave kindly or politely. He walked out with the confidence of a man who believed fatherhood was optional. I still remember him closing the door, his suitcase rolling behind him, while baby Daniel slept in my arms, unaware that half his world had just disappeared. I vowed that day that my son would never feel that emptiness. I would double myself if I had to. And I did. I worked 2 jobs for almost 8 years. Day shifts at a printing company, night shifts waitressing at a small diner that smelled permanently of fried onions. I'd come home exhausted, smelling like grease and toner, but Daniel would run to me with his gap-toothed smile, and suddenly everything felt worth it. When he was 12, I finally landed a stable office job as a payroll assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it meant health insurance, paid leave, and enough income that I could breathe again. I still remember the first time Daniel said, "Mom, you seem less tired." It made me cry in the kitchen over a pot of pasta. Daniel grew into a respectful, thoughtful young man. He wasn't perfect, no child is, but he had a good heart. He helped me carry groceries, asked about my day, and worked part-time at a bookstore to save for college. I was so proud when he graduated with a degree in business management. We celebrated with takeout pizza because I couldn't afford a fancy dinner, but he hugged me and said, "Mom, you're the reason I made it." So when he met Lily Sanders, I was genuinely happy for him. She was sweet, polite, and seemed genuinely fond of Daniel. She worked as a graphic designer and had a quiet elegance that made her appear older than her 24 years. Her mother, Cassandra Sanders, on the other hand, well, she was a different story. Cassandra was poised, wealthy, and sophisticated in a way that felt almost theatrical. She owned a boutique interior design studio that catered to high-end clients in Charleston. Everything about her, the pearl necklaces, the flawless blonde hair, the tailored dresses, seemed designed to remind the world she was successful. The first time I met her was at a brunch Lily invited me to. I wore my nicest blue blouse and a pair of black slacks, hoping I fit in. Cassandra greeted me with a smile that felt polite, but distant, like she was meeting someone she had no intention of remembering. "Oh, you must be Daniel's mother," she said. "How lovely. I've heard you raised him all by yourself. You must be very resilient." Resilient. The word rolled off her tongue in a way that felt less like a compliment and more like a diagnosis. I told myself it didn't matter. We were 2 different women from 2 different worlds. As long as our kids were happy, that was enough. Or so I thought. When Daniel and Lily announced their engagement, I was thrilled. Lily hugged me tightly, and Daniel smiled in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy building Lego castles on the living room floor. I immediately began knitting a cream-colored throw blanket as a wedding gift, a silly little tradition in my family. But as wedding planning went on, I slowly realized how excluded I was becoming. It began subtly. Group chats without me. Appointments I wasn't invited to. Lily's family having private meetings with the wedding planner. Daniel assured me, "Mom, they're just helping out a lot. Don't worry, you'll be involved." But I wasn't. Invitations were made without my input. The venue was chosen without me. Even the menu, something I desperately wanted to contribute to, was finalized before I ever saw it. One evening, a few months before the wedding, I invited Daniel over for dinner. I made his favorite, lasagna with extra ricotta. We ate, chatted, laughed. Then I asked gently, "Honey, is there anything I could help with for the wedding?" He hesitated, just for a second. But I caught it. "I think everything is sorted, Mom. Lily's mom has it all under control. She wants to take care of it. It's important to her." I swallowed the knot in my throat. Of course it was important to her. She wanted the wedding to look perfect. And her definition of perfect didn't include a mother who shopped at discount stores and worked as an office clerk. Still, I told myself not to take it personally. Weddings can be overwhelming. People get caught up in the details. Maybe I was overthinking. But then came the bridal shower. I found out about it on social media. There they were, Lily, her bridesmaids, Cassandra, and even some distant relatives, posing around a beautifully decorated table filled with gifts. I stared at the photos for a long time, my chest tight. My name had never been mentioned. I wasn't invited. Not even accidentally. When I asked Daniel about it, he looked embarrassed. "Mom, it wasn't intentional. Cassandra's friend hosted it, and what?" I asked gently. "I don't belong?" He shook his head. "No, Mom. It's not like that." But it was like that. And the worst part? I didn't want to make Daniel feel guilty. I didn't want to add stress to his big moment. So I swallowed it all. The exclusion, the hurt, the disappointment. I told myself, this is his wedding, not mine. Let him be happy. Then the wedding day arrived. It was held at a stunning vineyard outside Charleston. Rolling hills, oak trees, white rose arches, string lights woven like stars above the guests. Everything was undeniably beautiful. Everything screamed money. Everything screamed Cassandra's influence. I wore a soft lavender dress I had saved for months to buy. It wasn't designer. It didn't sparkle. But when I looked in the mirror that morning, I felt proud. I had raised my son to this moment. I had earned the right to be here. But throughout the ceremony, I felt strangely invisible. Lily's side of the family dominated the front rows. I was placed on the far left, close enough to see, but far enough to feel like a spectator. Still, I held myself together. I smiled. I beamed at Daniel when he walked down the aisle. He looked so handsome in his navy suit, his eyes shining with excitement. The ceremony went smoothly. The vows were heartfelt. When Daniel kissed Lily, everyone clapped. I clapped too, wiping away a tear. Then came the reception. The atmosphere was full of music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Toasts began. First Lily's maid of honor, then the best man. Beautiful speeches filled with memories, jokes, and warm wishes. Then Daniel took the microphone. My heart swelled. This was the moment. Maybe he would thank me, acknowledge me, just a little. He smiled broadly and said, "I want to thank everyone for being here today. It means the world to us." He looked at Lily's parents. "And I want to give a special thank you to Cassandra and Robert Sanders for making all of this possible. They paid for everything, the venue, the catering, all of it. My mother-in-law really went above and beyond." People clapped. I clapped too, though my hands felt numb. And then, with a chuckle, he added, "My mom didn't buy a flower." The room laughed. I felt every breath leave my body. Daniel didn't mean it maliciously. I could tell. He said it casually, playfully, completely unaware of what he had just done. But the words echoed in my mind like a hammer striking glass. My mom didn't buy a flower. He wasn't wrong. I hadn't contributed, financially. I couldn't. But the fact that he said it publicly, joked about it in front of 200 people, felt like being stripped bare. It wasn't about the money. It was the implication. That I hadn't mattered. That I hadn't shown up. That I hadn't given. After everything I sacrificed, everything I'd poured into raising him alone, everything I'd endured, my mom didn't buy a flower. I forced myself to smile. I forced myself to stay seated. I forced myself to breathe. But inside, something in me collapsed. When Daniel continued his speech, thanking more people, I didn't hear a single word. My ears were ringing. My eyes were burning. My throat felt tight. I could feel Cassandra's eyes on me, as if she were evaluating my reaction. I held my chin high. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. After the speech, guests mingled, danced, and enjoyed themselves. I quietly stepped outside to catch my breath, pretending I needed fresh air. The vineyard was silent under the soft glow of lanterns. I leaned against the wooden railing, staring at the distant hills. I felt alone. Deeply, painfully alone. But what hurt most wasn't the exclusion. It was the realization that Daniel didn't understand what he'd done, and that he might never understand unless something changed. I stayed outside longer than I meant to, trying to steady myself. The night air was cool, settling softly against my skin. Somewhere behind me, laughter rang out from the reception hall. Music floated through the open doors, cheerful, upbeat, completely out of sync with the ache in my chest. I told myself not to ruin his day. I told myself that I could process this later, quietly, without making a scene. But as I stood there, gripping the railing, the vineyard lights blurring through my tears, I realized something I had never wanted to admit. I had raised a good man, but I had not raised a mindful one. Someone approached slowly behind me. I wiped my eyes before turning, expecting a caterer or maybe Lily. It was Robert Sanders, Lily's father. Of the two parents, Robert was quieter, more reserved. He rarely spoke unless it was necessary, and he never inserted himself unnecessarily into conversations. Even now, he approached with a gentle caution, as though afraid I might break if he came any closer. "May I join you?" he asked softly. I nodded, unsure what else to do. He stood beside me, looking out at the hills. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then, in a low voice, he murmured, "That wasn't fair, what Daniel said." My breath caught. I swallowed hard. "It's fine," I whispered. "He didn't mean anything by it." "I know he didn't," Robert said. "But that doesn't make it any less painful." I stared at him, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. Cassandra's sharpness had made me expect that her husband would be the same, polished, cold, detached. But Robert was nothing like her. His eyes were soft, almost apologetic. "You raised him well," he continued. "Anyone can see that. The boy has manners, kindness, ambition. That didn't come from us. That came from you." The words nearly undid me. I shook my head slightly. "He's just caught up in everything. Weddings, they make people forget who's watching." Robert hesitated, then said quietly, "Cassandra had too much control over this wedding. She enjoys hosting. Too much, if I'm being honest. I think in the process, maybe she pushed you out without realizing." I almost laughed. "Oh," she realized. He didn't deny it. We stood in silence again, the wind rustling through the rows of grapevines. "You know," Robert said softly, "sometimes showing restraint is a greater kindness than people realize." I looked at him, confused. "You could have gone inside and made that moment about you," he explained. "You could have demanded an apology. You could have confronted him. You didn't. That says a lot about your strength." Strength. I didn't feel strong. I felt hollow. "Thank you," I whispered. He offered a small nod before returning inside, leaving me alone again with my thoughts. I eventually went back in, prepared to quietly blend into the background until it was time to go home. But as soon as I walked through the doors, Cassandra intercepted me. She moved with purpose, her pearl necklace catching the light like a spotlight highlighting a villain in a play. "There you are," she said, studying me as though I were an object under auction lighting. "I hope you're enjoying the evening." I forced a polite smile. "It's lovely." Her lips curled. "Daniel made such a sweet little comment earlier. I suppose given the circumstances, humor helps ease awkwardness." I froze. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted me to feel small, to feel lesser, to feel replaced. "It wasn't awkward," I said evenly. "It was unnecessary." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised I had pushed back. "Well," she said lightly, "perhaps next time, you could be more involved. Weddings are expensive, after all." Her words slipped into my chest like icy blades. I met her gaze steadily. I was involved. I raised the groom. She blinked. For the first time since I had met her, I saw her composure falter. Before she could respond, Lily appeared.
Oh,
Evelyn, she said brightly. We were looking for you. We're about to cut the cake. She hugged me briefly, unaware of the tension. I let her guide me toward the center of the room where Daniel was waiting. He looked happy, genuinely, blissfully happy, and that alone steadied me enough to remain calm. When he saw me, he smiled and kissed my cheek. Mom, I'm glad you're back. You okay? I'm fine, I said softly. He didn't hear the exhaustion in my voice. And maybe that was for the best. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Dancing, photos, speeches from Lily's family, more laughter, more compliments directed at Cassandra. I nodded politely, took a few pictures, and stayed until it was socially acceptable to leave. When I finally walked out into the night, the cool air hit me like a wave of relief. I held onto the railing near the parking lot, taking deep breaths. Then I felt a hand touch my shoulder. Not Cassandra. Not Lily. Not anyone. It was Daniel. Mom, he said gently. Why are you leaving early? I thought you were staying longer. I turned to him and saw the young man I raised, the same boy who used to hug me after nightmares, who saved his allowance to buy me Mother's Day gifts, who cried when he left for college. I forced a smile. You too deserve the night. I didn't want to be in the way. In the way, he repeated slowly. Mom, what are you talking about? I looked at him, really looked at him. He had no idea. None at all. The speech, the exclusion, the jokes, the whispered comments. He was oblivious in the way only someone who has never struggled could be. Daniel, I said quietly, may I tell you something? Of course, he replied, confused. I took a breath. When you said that thing about me during your speech, it hurt. His confusion turned into shock.
what?
The flower thing? Mom, that was just a joke. I know, I said gently. But it was a joke at my expense. In front of everyone. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And I know Cassandra paid for everything. I never expected otherwise. But I was your mother long before she was your mother-in-law. Daniel's face fell. Mom, I didn't mean. I just thought people would laugh. I didn't think. That's just it, I whispered. You didn't think. His shoulders slumped. I'm so sorry, he said, voice cracking. I nodded, accepting the apology even though the sting hadn't faded. I love you, I told him. And I want your marriage to be happy. But please don't forget who stood by you when no one else did. He hugged me, tightly, desperately. I won't, he whispered. I swear I won't. I hugged him back, letting myself believe him. Because that's what mothers do. We choose hope, even when we're hurting. In the weeks after the wedding, Daniel visited often. More than usual, actually. I think he realized how much he had overlooked. He brought groceries, fixed things around the house, sometimes just sat quietly with me watching old movies. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the wedding, he arrived unexpectedly. He looked nervous, like he was bracing for something. I need to tell you something, he said, sitting beside me. Okay. I confronted Cassandra. My heart skipped. And he sighed. She wasn't happy. I nearly laughed. I can imagine. She said she didn't understand why you were upset, that you should be grateful, that she did what you couldn't. I went still. Daniel looked at me, guilt heavy in his eyes. Mom, I told her she was out of line. I told her she disrespected you. Lily backed me up. It turned into a whole argument. Cassandra said she felt unappreciated, and that if we didn't want her help anymore, she'd step back. I blinked. And, what did you say? I said good. We don't need her controlling everything. A quiet warmth spread through my chest. Relief, validation, something like healing. That took courage, I said. He shook his head. What took courage was you raising me alone all those years. This is nothing compared to that. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt seen.
Truly seen.
A few days later, Lily came by. She hugged me tightly and apologized for how everything had unfolded. I didn't realize how much my mom was overshadowing you, she confessed. I'm so sorry. We talked for a long time, openly, honestly, vulnerably. It felt like the beginning of a genuine bond. Months passed. Daniel and Lily settled into their new home. I visited often, sometimes helping in the garden or cooking dinner with them. Things slowly found a better rhythm, a healthier one. Cassandra kept her distance, though she sent occasional stiff messages through Lily. I never asked Daniel for repayment of the hurt he caused. I never demanded restitution or recognition. I didn't need it, because life has a strange way of balancing itself. One evening, nearly a year after the wedding, Daniel called me. His voice trembled with emotion. "Mom," he said, "Lily's pregnant." Tears filled my eyes instantly. "A grandchild. A new beginning. And we want you involved," he added.
Really involved.
"Not like before. Not pushed aside. We want you to be the first to know things.
To help.
To be part of everything." I cover my mouth, overwhelmed. "Daniel, I would love that. And one more thing," he continued. "Yes, we decided something about the baby." "What?" "If it's a girl, we're naming her Evelyn." My breath caught. The tears I had been holding back spilled freely. "Oh, Daniel. You deserve it," he whispered. "You deserve everything." And in that moment, the wound that started at that wedding, those awful words, that humiliating moment, finally healed. Not because he paid me back, not because the world finally recognized my sacrifices, but because my son, the boy I raised alone with every ounce of strength I had, remembered who I was.
And who I would always be. His mother.
The one who bought not a flower, but an entire life's worth of love. If you felt this story, make sure you like, share, and subscribe for more dramatic life stories that hit the heart. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Now tell me, where are you watching from? In comment.